Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're hailing from. Welcome to another edition of Ask an OpenShift Admin. I am joined by the one and only Andrew Sullivan and his guests that he has invited today. Andrew, you want to take it away from here, please, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And again, welcome everybody. Appreciate you joining us today. So this is our second episode after our brief hiatus there for Summit and KubeCon. Again, if you didn't catch all the content related to that, it's all in the channel history. There's blog posts. There's all kinds of other stuff out there. So,
JP Dade wants to know how you're doing, Richard.
Yeah,
I know. Doing splendidly. Always nice to hear from you, James.
Yeah, it's Richard. Welcome back to the stream. You know, you were here for our very first episode, so it's good to have you back.
Yeah,
sure. This is one of our office hours series of live streams. Effectively, what that means is that we are here for you, our audience, to talk about whatever it is that is on your mind. So feel free at any point throughout the stream, and Chris and I will try and remind you periodically to ask any questions that you happen to have. Of course, we are OpenShift experts, and I think all of us here are probably, or at least me and Chris, are on the administrator side. I think Joe and Richard have a little more developer side experience, so we might be able to help with some of those things. But by all means, whatever it is that is bothering you, whatever burning questions you have, whatever it might be, let us know, and we're here to help. So with that in mind, if you all don't have questions, we of course have a topic, and in line with that topic, I have invited a couple of folks to join us. So if you haven't seen on your screen, today's topic is the SPLAT team, as well as the vSphere Problem Detector. So first, I want to hand off to Joe Callan to introduce himself, as well as what is the SPLAT team, Joe? What is SPLAT?
So Joe Callan, I've been at Red Hat for about 5 years, out of my basement in around Kalamazoo, Michigan. No one knows where I actually live. So
I bet I do.
You might pop on Michigan.
Ooh, no, I don't.
Okay.
Never mind.
Anyways, we're outside Kalamazoo. So the SPLAT team, we're the specialist platform team. So we, the members, have a specific platform that we're supposed to be experts on. And then how does that integrate with OpenShift is pretty much our goal. And how do we help our developers, or which are our customers, principally, navigate through that platform.
Got it. So you are, let me make sure I'm getting this right. So internal to the engineering teams, you're an escalation point for when they have questions about how like AWS or vSphere or Red Hat virtualization, how they work and how they should integrate with that platform.
Exactly. Right.
Got it. And we are also joined by Richard Vanderpool. And Richard, as I said, you were on our very first show, and now you're on our 29th show. But your role over the last 8-9 months has changed pretty significantly, right?
Yeah, it sure has. So I've been with Red Hat for about 27 months at this point. It feels like it's been 10 years because it's just been an absolute blast, and there's so much to learn and develop your skill set here at Red Hat. It's just been a really great time. But yeah, so prior to about 9 months ago, I worked in OpenShift support. So likely a number of the folks in the stream have either talked to me over the phone or have corresponded with me via case updates. So and that was a really awesome time to spend learning the product, learning the pain points. And now that I'm in the specialist platform role, I get to bring some of that customer insight into this position, and that has really been awesome to take some of the issues that we were aware of in support and begin to help make more folks aware of those and try to develop KCS documentation, fix bugs, whatever we can do to help the broader organization as it relates to the various clouds that we support.
Yeah, I can only imagine how much the engineering teams value that perspective, because I know like anytime I interact with engineering folks, they're always kind of begging for that customer perspective. Like, well, why are customers doing this? What does this mean to them? Like, how can, and they love it when we bring them on customer calls too. So I can only imagine how valuable that is. And yeah, to say that Red Hat is a fire hose in your first, I've been here for not quite 3 years. So it'll be 3 years in August. And yeah, it's a fire hose. That's for sure.
No, that's
It is indeed.
par for the course. Yeah. I've
Yeah.
been here about 3 years as well. And
Yeah,
I
you came
enjoy
over from
drinking
the
from
Ansible
fire
side.
hoses. So yeah.
Me too.
And I came over from the Ansible side. So yeah.
So as always, for anybody who is new to the stream, for those who are old to the stream, right, I like to kind of, before we get into the topic, talk about a few things that are top of mind or things that I feel are important to you all as administrators. So there are roughly 3.5 things. I say that's the precise amount, and that's exactly what I meant. For anybody who watches the Cowboy Kent Rollins on YouTube, my kids have been getting into him lately, and he measures everything. He just dumps it in and goes, "Yep," and that's the precise amount that I wanted. And it's completely, like, it could be half a
random.
cup, it could be a teaspoon, it could be. So anyways. So a couple of things that are top of mind. So first and foremost, if you missed the email or you have unsubscribed from our various emailing lists, you might not have noticed that that Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8.4 has gone GA today.
Ooh.
Let
Yay,
me
rel. Let me grab
find the right.
Oh, you got it. All right.
So first I'm going to share my screen. And then I'm going to grab this link and I'm going to paste it into here. So this blog post, which is kind of a meta blog post, has links to all of the other various what's new in 8.4 blog posts and other things that are interesting or should be interesting to you based off of what's in there. Come on, there we go. I'm trying to drag your videos out of the way so I can actually access the URLs. Additionally, I'll also make a plug for this on-demand webinar.
Ooh, yeah.
So this one is great. I haven't seen all of it yet because I need to also learn what's new in 8.4.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely recommend, if you, like I do, you have a video or something running in the background that you can kind of half listen to while you're doing other things. This is a great way to learn about what's new in 8.4 as well. So definitely check out both of those resources. I know we have a lot of crossover between RHEL admins and OpenShift admins.
And on the RHEL show is today, so we'll be talking about this a little bit, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, good point.
This afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern, if you're not subscribed to the calendar, which I'll drop a link to now.
The second thing I wanted to talk about is that after much editing, I'll use the word editing, the OpenShift subscription and sizing guide has been updated. You can see the last updated date here is May 18th. So this is actually posted in 2 places. It's on redhat.com as well as on openshift.com. I've only got the redhat.com one up here, so I'll paste that link. So inside of here, the major changes from being a part of the editing process, we added in a bunch of stuff around OpenShift Platform Plus. So if you're curious about what OpenShift Platform Plus is, what the components are, right, all of that other stuff, there's a huge section in here about that. Additionally, we made quite a bit of updates, changes, so kind of clarification around what is and what isn't a infrastructure node. So
nice.
Way on down here, there's a whole section around infrastructure nodes.
And we always get a lot of questions about that, so that's cool.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I can't link directly to this section
Paragraph,
for whatever reason. Yeah. So there is an infrastructure node here, section here. It includes a lot of clarification on what does and doesn't qualify. So, for example, if you are using the infrastructure node paradigm, it's not going to valid or invalidate that, subscription exception if you're using like a custom monitoring agent. Like, hey, we wrote our own monitoring agent. I need to deploy that. We don't consider that application workload, so therefore it's still an infrastructure node. If you need to deploy like VMware tools, or whatever that happens to be, all that stuff. So definitely read through that if you are curious about any of the details. If there are things that you think might qualify for an infrastructure node qualification. Yeah, again, lots and lots of details inside of there. So, and I did post that link, so be sure to check that out. So the third thing I wanted to talk about, which is one that I will I want to make everybody aware of, but I don't have any additional knowledge than what you see here. And that was, or is, I think it was yesterday, it might have been early this morning. There was an announcement of this CVE around a Symlink Exchange attack with runC.
That's very bad.
Yes. So
I mean, it says it's important, but like the premise is very bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I don't have any inside details or knowledge. This is outside of it's like low level stuff that is outside of my realm of expertise. I would
runC is the
definitely
container runtime under cryo, by the way.
Thank you. Yep. So it's the components that instantiates containers, right? Or no, it's the
container
runtime
standard interface.
Yeah, the
CRI. Yeah. Container runtime interface, right? Yeah.
And it's used by OpenShift, it's used by RHEL, etc. You can see
Everything,
all the details inside of here. One thing to note from a Red Hat perspective, I think we mark this as reduced impact. If we come down here to the FAQ, it talks about SE Linux helping to mitigate this. That doesn't mean that it is not an impact. It just means that SE Linux, systems with SE Linux enabled have a reduced impact.
So if you're watching this and you're not using OpenShift, but some other distribution, heads up.
Yeah, and the good news is, OpenShift, both OpenShift 3 and OpenShift 4 have SE Linux enabled by default. So unless you went out of your way, and I honestly don't even know if it's
how you
supported to turn off SE Linux, unless you have gone way far out of your way, SE Linux is there. So please, if you have clusters that are, and there's several here, if you allow untrusted users to run containers in your environment, or allow trusted users to deploy untrusted containers in your environment. So if you qualify for either one of those, please keep an eye on this security bulletin. It'll be updated constantly. If you saw, I'm going to jump to the top. If you saw up here, it was updated an hour ago.
Yeah, wow.
So they're continuing to update that with what's going on. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about is something that actually came out of a phone call I had this morning. So I was on a customer call with a customer over in Europe. It's bright and early, 7 a.m. this morning. That's why I might seem a little more wired than normal, because I've had like a whole pot of coffee.
You've had sufficient coffee? Wow, good for you.
They asked us, and it was myself and one of our peers that were presenting, and they asked us, hey, sometimes, if we open a support case, or even if we're just searching through, the Red Hat material, we'll find stuff in the KCS, on access.redhat.com that is either in addition to or sometimes contradictory to what's in the documentation. So how do we know, or how do we deconflict, right? How do we choose which one of those is the authoritative source? And I'll tell you my off-the-cuff answer, and I definitely want to get Richard's perspective here, because I'm sure, having been in support, that he has some opinions on this. So my off-the-cuff response was essentially, the documentation is the source of truth, except where the KCS supersedes it. So the KCS is often, my perspective, to be clear, it is used to fill in gaps in the documentation, because docs take time to update, especially if there's, I think the one that this customer pointed out to me was like infrastructure nodes, right? So the KCS has this, big article here on infrastructure nodes that goes into, a number of details. And yes, it's been updated recently, but from what I remember, this article actually predates when we had detailed infrastructure node information in the documentation. So this was a bridge, right, in order to get there. And then the support folks, they do a good job of keeping these things up to date, largely in that respect. So I want to kind of pick your brain on this, Richard, and get your thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually quite familiar with this specific issue, because it has been a long-running topic for almost since the inception of 4, has been how to set up infra nodes. And the one bit of caution that I'll give when judging KCS versus doc is the source of truth, but it doesn't cover all possible scenarios. If you're looking at a KCS that is 18 months since the last update, approach it with caution, because things change fast.
Right.
From Y stream to Y stream, from version to version, things can change and break. And these KCS are written to address very specific problems. And in general, they're really good ways out of sticky situations. Now, if we find a situation where this is a good example where we have infrastructure nodes being discussed in this KCS article. This is a situation where we need to be raising a bug back to docs and say, look, this is a missing piece of the documentation that numerous customers are running up against. What is the best practice? Because we may not want support defining the best practice on how to set up infra nodes, because we're going to do what needs to be done to help the customer through, but it may be the product has a very different view of how to approach setting up infra nodes, which they did. And so making the product team aware via bugs is really key, because otherwise they may not be aware that this is a massive question out in the customer base.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that there is that feedback mechanism as well. Sometimes it does take time. The docs team, they have a lot on their plate.
On their plate. Yeah.
I know, having, when was it? It was the 4.4 time frame. I wrote a series of blog posts on like day 2 actions, with your deployed cluster. And it was nothing more than just a reorganization of the docs. And I think it took 2 versions of docs for them to then incorporate that. It was like 4.6 timeframe was when that was made into a section in the docs. And it's just, keeping up with all the things going on in the product consumes a massive amount of time. So, doing those reorganization things is not that it's a lower priority, but it can often involve a lot of effort. And
absolutely, because everything in the docs is tested very thoroughly. Yeah. So it takes time to get a blessed, thoroughly tested procedure into the docs. So.
I'll also offer that if anybody has feedback on the docs, like UX, user experience, that type of stuff, let us know.
We're here for it.
Yeah, I now have a reoccurring one-on-one with the director for the docs team. I guess I've opened my mouth enough. Yeah, I've opened my mouth enough that I was given that privilege.
That's pretty cool.
So I'm happy to work on behalf of you all, our audience, right, customers, the field, etc., to bring back that information to the docs team and provide that. So if there's things that are wrong, please open a BZ or a GitHub issue. But if it's like, hey, it would really be easier to use these docs if they were like this, that type of stuff, I am super interested in that. So please don't hesitate to send me a message. And you can do that.
I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
Just standard contact information, andrew.sullivan@redhat.com. You can send me a DM on Twitter, Practical Andrew. If you're watching any of the chats, it's the same as my Twitch username here, Practical Andrew.
Yeah.
Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any feedback on the documentation UX.
Yeah. And if you encounter a KCS that is not clear or you have questions about, just don't hesitate to open a case to get an official weigh-in from us as to the applicability of that article. It is sometimes, depending on what you're doing, it makes sense to get a double check. So it's.
And yes, Christian is doing his leg day and saying he would like more anchor tags in the docs.
Yep. Yeah. And it's so funny thing. So Christian, now that you bring that up, I'll use this as an opportunity so the docs, actually almost every one of the little subsections really is a link. The problem is they're not always obvious. So I'm just choosing a random section here. So I can go to like obtaining the installation program, and you see this is a link. It's got the little hyperlink. You can see up here in the bar, it's got the ending to it. So this one does 2, this one does 2. Let's see if I can find one that doesn't. Of course, I would choose a section now that doesn't have, that I can't find what I'm looking for.
Well, yeah, you picked a good page.
I know.
I thought it was only the major categories that had the links, because I've ran into that too. Like, this is the section I want to send you, but
the one that you're probably looking for is going to be in the install, like bare metal install, where you have networking infrastructure.
Yeah,
there's a section under there that doesn't have it. I think it's for, I can't recall. I think it's like DNS. It's
I know. I say this. We appear to be getting better at this because now
Yes,
Yeah.
Here,
There
load
it is.
balancers.
Yeah,
like
that's it.
so if you and I'm using, what is this, Chrome. So
Mhm.
if I right click and go to inspect, and then I need to move this over here so it's easier to read. So if I go to the DOM inspector here inside of Chrome, so you can see it actually does have an ID tag. So it's literally in this instance called load balancers. So I can copy that ID tag out and then just append to the URL # or hashtag load balancers, and then it'll go right there. So a little docs hack. So yeah, it took me a while to figure that one out, that you don't always have to link just these top level ones. Or here, network topology requirements is another one. See, there's no link associated with it. If I do the inspect, it comes up with network topology requirements, and I can do the same thing.
I didn't know you could do that, Andrew.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
That is awesome. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Because that particular section I've wanted to hard link like that maybe 100 times.
Yeah.
So that's good to know.
So
There you
yes, Christian, I agree. It's not the greatest workflow, but it gets it done. And I don't know if this is, like, I know all of our docs are written in ASCII doc, and I don't know if it's just the
I think you have to
big
flag.
or there's maybe it only links certain down to an H3 or something, and this is an H4 and an H5. I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyways, a little tip there.
Cool.
All right, so today's topic, so the specialist platform team, which again, very privileged, very happy to have both Joe and Richard join us to talk about what it is that they do and how that interacts with engineering. So kind of, Joe, you mentioned that you are effectively an escalation point for the engineering folks and how specific platforms work. And just this morning, I included you all, because I know you're both kind of vSphere specialists. I included you on an email where it was like, hey, how do we, what are some of the low level things that we can check to do performance and all of these other things, which I know is not necessarily directly in your day-to-day responsibilities, but I hope you don't mind me relying on you for an escalation point as well.
Yeah, no worries.
So what does a day in the life of a specialist platform team member look like?
I actually think this is one of the great things about this role is you don't really know. So I know that's really vague, but so we're on Slack and then in GChat, just fielding questions at least part of the day. From it could be anybody within Red Hat that has a problem. Definitely CI is a big focus. This morning I was making a change in CI to run our upgrade process between a major version 4.7 to 4.8 more often. So definitely CI, monitoring CI, making sure that our specific platform that we're responsible for is passing accordingly.
Can I go down a tangent for a moment? I think it would be fascinating to know a little bit about the CI system that we use for OpenShift itself.
Oh, sure. So we currently, CI actually runs on OpenShift. And I will admit that I don't know it well enough, but so our specific OpenShift cluster for CI runs actually in AWS, but our vSphere environment runs on VMware on AWS, so in VMC. Our current environment in VMC is 6 nodes. We originally had it set to EDRS. I don't know if anybody knows out there about VMC, but they will spin up additional bare metal nodes for you based on your load within your vSphere cluster. We recently set that statically, so we got 6 nodes. We run 12 OpenShift clusters concurrently, and usually we're hitting that max most of the time. It's all vSAN. VMC is a very opinionated design, so we get what we get. But that's the reason why we wanted it too. we would rather not be vSphere admins. We just want to use it. So I mean, we can get into more details of the of how it's set up, but that's kind of the gist.
Yeah, that's the whole managed services thing, right? Of I just want to use the platform. I don't want to have
right.
Which, speaking of which, I've been meaning to invite our product manager for managed services onto.
Yes.
Chris, I think you saw that me discussing that idea of I want to have the managed services folks come on, and I want a really inflammatory title about like how managed services is the death of the administrator or something. And,
Oh, damn. It ain't the death, that's for sure. But
no, definitely not. As Joe said, you still have to do some administration.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we were just having an issue in VMC that we spent quite a bit of time on, that we were pretty much being administrators again. So
yeah, it does
so,
happen from time to time. So.
And I know you all get involved in a lot of different areas, and in particular, I'm thinking of, I saw both of your names in like every other message on the recent BZ about the VMXNet offload issue that delayed OpenShift 4.6 to 4.7 upgrades.
Right.
So one, I think, and I know like JP Dade, who I saw here, I think he was one of the ones who was waiting on that to be fixed, along with many other folks, that were impacted by it. So one, I think it would be interesting to get your perspective on, one, maybe a little bit about what the actual bug was, but two, kind of the process behind that. Like, how do we find these things? How do we address these things? How do we fix these things on your side?
Right. So it was kind of an interesting way that it came up originally. So Richard and I were asked by there's I don't know if you guys have discussed this on the channel or not, but the assisted installer. So those folks reached out to us. They were saying, well, we keep having issues installing vSphere on 4.7, and at first we were kind of, you've got to be doing something wrong. And the more that we looked at it, we found out that they were right as far as there was this issue. So it was kind of a guess. So I just started. I don't know why it popped in my head to start disabling offloading features. Maybe just because I've seen problems in the past with that before. But so I think the original offloading feature was a higher level one that I disabled, and the cluster just kind of sprung back to life. So the gist on the bug, or it's not really a bug per se, at least especially from VMware's perspective, they don't feel that it's a bug. So VXLAN can use two different ports, I can't remember, 4, 7, 8, 9, and I can't remember the other one.
Don't worry about port numbers.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember. So they VMware added offloading features for UDP for VXLAN, which is that's awesome, right? Because everything OpenShift SDN is VXLAN. So but if you change the port for VXLAN to the non-default, the NIC, VMXNet 3 NIC just drops those packets, which is what was the real cause of the problem. So in RHEL 8.5, I think, the current kernel BZ, they've implemented not a fix, but a workaround to defaultly turn those offloading features off. And I think it's being backported to 8.4, which will be then picked up in Arcas. Yeah, it was a very interesting bug to work on.
Just to reproduce was interesting. It took a lot of work.
Yes.
Oh.
I tell you, so I didn't know it at the time, and it didn't occur to me until, I don't know, 2 weeks ago. So when 4.7 was first released, I was deploying a new cluster like I always do. And for whatever reason, at that time, I was deploying a cluster. It was all bare metal, or a platform equals none, non-integrated, platform agnostic. And I had my control plane on vSphere and my worker nodes on Rev. And I could not get the cluster to deploy. I could deploy vSphere IPI, and it would be, it wasn't stable, but it would deploy. And with that mix of nodes, I couldn't get it to come up at all. And I was actually chatting, internally with Christian Hernandez, and like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. Like, I just can't figure. And I was
why is it
banging,
broken?
I was banging my head against it for like 2 weeks or something, and finally just gave up. And I would switch between all vSphere and all Rev instead of the mixture. So it didn't occur to me until about 2 weeks ago that I bet I was hitting that bug. And I actually went in and I manually turned off the settings. So on last week's stream, I'll dig up the link here in just a second. On last week's stream, I showed how to manually do those things. You can. I did that, and it just popped right up and deployed and finished the deployment without an issue. It was funny to encounter that. And just a quick plug here. So openshift.com.blog or openshift.com/blog. We do have every week after a live stream, we do publish our show notes and everything.
Yes.
So be sure to Friday mornings, sometimes early morning, sometimes mid morning, but we get these blog posts out. So here's the link I was referring to. And it goes and it shows the machine config. Then it uses right here. Just executes on the host. Yep. To turn off that offload setting inside of there.
And that's moved to, so that this was my original PR to do that change with the help of some networking folks that said, do it better this way. So that's moved to common someplace else. Just so, because what you mentioned, basically. Right? Because what you mentioned, Andrew, is if I've got platform none, but I'm still running on vSphere, I can't just apply the fix to the vSphere section of MCO.
Yeah.
Because only that will be templated if I know that I'm running on, in the install config platform : vSphere.
Yeah, I've been learning a lot more, and I reference this section of the machine config operator, GitHub, fairly frequently, because if you're familiar with the on-prem APIs, right, they use the keep alive HA proxy thing. So I reference this pretty frequently, and here I'm gonna pick on one of these, right? We'll go in here and look at. Actually, I don't want common. I want I'll look at the control plane. And if we look on-prem and files, we've got like this keep alive D. So this is what manages the API virtual IP address, right? That's associated with an on-prem API cluster. So I use these, again, pretty frequently. But what you might notice here is that like some of these, I don't know if it's on this one, some of these have like templates that it uses inside of here. Like this is a template file. So here, like, where does that LB config LB port come from? And so I've been like digging through and learning more about how all of this stuff works in order to determine, where those values come from and how they're impacted and where changes happen at and all this other stuff. So it's one of those, like, working for an open source company. It's phenomenal that I can just go and look at the code, and at the same time I can go and ask the engineers on the back end. We're working at other, previously non-open source companies where it's one of those like, well, you got to know the right guy who knows the right guy who can enable your account to access the source control system with the right permissions, but we also have to trust you and make sure you're not just going to sell the code. Like, yeah, it's so nice.
Sometimes you still need to know the right guy though, that knows how it works.
Yeah. So Splat, the specialist platform team, right? So I think, Joe, I know you're a vSphere, you're one of the vSphere specialists, and Richard, I believe you're the other vSphere specialist.
Yep,
but
sure.
On the team, I know you all have other folks that focus on other platforms.
Yeah, we sure do. The other platform that we're managing at the moment is Azure. We're looking at expanding to 2 other clouds in short order, but right now our primary focus is vSphere and Azure. And Joe and I usually hang out in Forum VMware in Slack. We have other folks that hang out in Forum Azure. Kenny Woodson is also one of our colleagues, and he's primarily working on Azure. We do also have someone working on ARM, which is pretty cool too. That's one of the newer platforms we're looking at.
Did someone say my favorite architecture?
Yeah, it's still my dream to be able to stand up OpenShift on a Raspberry Pi. I mean, I only have the 4 gig model, so that's unlikely, but that would be cool.
Yeah.
That's what I just need to convince my wife that I can buy some like 6-8 gig Raspberry Pis and then put ESXi ARM on it and see if you can build like a UPI, or I don't know if IPI would be good.
Let's put it like this, guys. I've gone down this road, and I actually ended up, Andrew pointed me to a website to buy used servers, and I ended up with a big Dell 2U blade or chassis in my basement now. So I've gone down the Pi route. I would like to go down it again sometime, but I would have to upgrade everything Pi wise. So
yeah, I know. We speaking of, we have a what's new and what's next coming up relatively soon, don't we?
Mm-hmm. It is June 22nd, I think.
Yeah, I think
double checking here.
What's next is later in June. What's new?
June 24th is the what's new.
Okay.
Yeah. So June 24th, folks, tune in for the OpenShift 4.8. What is new in OpenShift 4.8 session? Yeah.
So yeah, that's already on the calendar. A month away.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Sure does.
Yeah. So Lorbus, I see you commenting here. MCO is OpenShift secret sauce. It's funny to have. I'm an old vSphere administrator as well. That's what I did for a decade. I was an admin and an architect. So I look at MCO and like OpenShift's relationship to CoreOS and the bridge of MCO is very similar to how vCenter manages ESXi. Right? It's all done from within the platform, or it's almost entirely done from within the platform, and it gives all of that configurability and manageability and all of that stuff that's inside of there. So, yeah, I'm also a big fan of the machine config operator. It does take a little bit of a mindset shift, right? You get out of the mindset of I'm going to SSH into the node and modify these files, and instead you treat individual nodes mostly as disposable. So you only do things that apply to all the nodes. And we've talked about that before here on the stream with like using, you don't use MCO to set static IPs on individual worker nodes because that just doesn't work. So yeah, prepare to shift those paradigms. Christian's full of aphorisms today.
Yeah, he is.
It's a very inspirational workout today.
Yeah, no kidding.
So Richard, I wanted to ask you, with your perspective, and again, coming from the support side where you had, some influence and some input into what engineering is doing, like, hey, there's a problem, we need to fix this. But now from your side, how does that influence, or how does that change? And what I mean by that is, I think you still have some customer interaction and stuff like that. You definitely bring that perspective. And how do we, how do you take your vSphere expertise, bring that into the OpenShift platform and influence what they're doing with like the machine API for vSphere?
Yeah, so I would describe our team as a multiplier. So we are actively seeking out input into things that need to be fundamentally reviewed. For example, Joe and I, we are actively reviewing case data right now to try to understand why installations on vSphere are problematic, why there's so many cases opened up. And that's just an example of one of the efforts we've undertaken to try to just holistically look at the customer experience of vSphere and look at ways we can go back and either improve things ourselves, or if we can go back and file bugs or RFEs to try to push improvements back in and have them considered for implementation on down the line. So our team is actively engaged in the, I wouldn't say necessarily in the support process, but certainly engaged with the data that we're getting back. And Joe and I still get on the phone with customers from time to time. I wouldn't say it's frequent, but I would say maybe monthly we're on a call with the customer, working through and trying to understand pain points to either push a bug along or see if we can help out ourselves in the resolution.
So I'm going to steal a link out of our notes here. I hope you all don't mind me sharing this one, which I'm assuming that this is one that you all created.
It is. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so this is an example of an issue that is just pervasive throughout VMware cases. We have an ambiguous statement of my master nodes are slow. Okay, well, what does that mean? It could be that the host itself is overcommitted, or it could be something wrong with OpenShift. We really don't know or have the tools to dig in. So what we did was we put together this knowledge article, which describes what we do as SPLAT engineers when we're trying to understand where the bottleneck lies. In conjunction with that, we also did a 2-day education session with the support team to try to pass along this knowledge and give them some handles to know when to dig in and when to push back and try to get help from VMware to understand where a performance bottleneck might lie, because we may have customers that are following OpenShift best practices, but they may not be following VMware best practices, and that can have a tremendously negative impact on the stability of their OpenShift deployment, and not something that we have insight into necessarily from a must gather.
Well, we've also noticed from customers that the silos still exist. Andrew, you were saying you're a vSphere admin. I'm sure you, and I was a vSphere admin at one point. There's a network team, there's a storage team, and there's a VMware team, and now there's an OpenShift team. And the silos, at least on customer calls, you can see that those still are definitely alive and
sometimes
doing well.
There's an operating system team that's in there. Sometimes there's a security team that's in there. Yeah, it's that was
For sure.
When I was a customer. I was the vSphere administrator, but I had to work with the network team, the storage team, the security team. We didn't know what was inside of the virtual machines. We were handed basically OS templates. Here's your Windows Server 2012 template. Here's your RHEL, at the time it was RHEL 3 and RHEL 4 template. And whenever somebody asks for one of these, deploy one of those, type of things. So yeah, that kind of top to bottom troubleshooting is hard. How do you know where it's at? And looking at this, there's some really interesting stuff inside of here. Like I didn't know that we had a podman command here to do the etcd perf, OpenShift scale etcd perf. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's definitely a good one to run to make sure that your storage, because we don't know what your underlying storage is. I mean, you could have vSAN,
local disk,
NFS, local disk, fiber channel. So
USB keys.
Oh God. Thunderbolt drives, could be anything. Yeah.
Oh yeah, anything.
So I'm
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I would just say quickly. So the intent of this article is to provide both the VMware ESXi host side of analyzing and gathering data, but also here at the bottom, it gives handles on how to collect the metrics that are going to be useful from an OpenShift perspective. So there's a set of queries that are down at the bottom of this article that you can run to pull back the data that we can analyze or support can analyze in conjunction with the ESXi metrics. So it gives you both the host and the guest perspective of things, and it's helpful in pinning it down.
Very cool. And I want to use this as a jumping off point or another tangent point around the vSphere problem detector. And both of you actually very helpfully corrected me, because I have been kind of casually associating your team with the vSphere Problem Detector, when in fact it's not. So can you kind of give us some background there? What is the Problem Detector? Where does it fit in? And what does it do? And I'm going to pull up the GitHub page here.
Absolutely. So the vSphere Problem Detector was introduced in 4.7. And the intent of the vSphere Problem Detector is to identify common misconfigurations that will lead to potential outages. It could be outages with regards to storage or the inability to scale machines. Its intent is to provide alerts specific to what misconfigurations are being detected by us. It's something that rides along with the cluster storage operator, and it is something that's being actively enhanced as we get feedback from the field. A recent example of that is, I'm sure everyone has probably run into this at some point, the encoding of a password with a trailing line feed. It's something that is really difficult to pin down unless you know that that's a problem. So we've got a PR in place right now to add detection for that. But it's something that can waste days, and it can have a real business impact to our customers because they can't scale their workloads effectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so this one is interesting to me because I view it as a way, and I can only assume that there, or I hope there might be more things like this in the future to help us kind of pre-detect or prefix, pre-identify. I'm going to keep using the prefix pre.
Just keep saying pre.
Issues before they become issues. So previous company, we got a new, SVP of support. And I remember she kept, she came in, and one of the things she was talking about was we want to get out of, proactive support, and we want to get into preemptive support, right? Proactive is I found something, I'm taking care of it. Preemptive is I fixed it before it was ever a problem. So this is one of those things that there's a lot of potential here for me, and it makes me very excited. Although I will say I think that there is actually an issue with upgrades related to the vSphere Problem Detector. So I feel a little less guilty pointing that out now that I know it's not you all directly responsible for that.
Well, there is, but it's being actively addressed. And I saw the PR go in for it yesterday actually to address this. So I think it is. Yeah. So just for those that don't know, if you installed following the vSphere installation guidance pre 4.7, and you did not provide a valid username and password, let's say, for example, your vSphere administrator wouldn't allow you to have the credentials necessary to install, but you still followed the UPI guidance for VMware installs. When you upgraded to 4.7, your storage operator degraded because we're checking for that now. So it's a valid catch, but we're softening it from a degradation to an alert. And kind of going back to the predictive piece of this, the vSphere Problem Detector feeds metrics into Prometheus. So tools like Insights, and I believe telemetry also pushes up some of this data as well, are directly fed by the vSphere Problem Detector.
Yeah, to help us. So I think one of the biggest things within the Problem Detector, at least from our perspective, moving forward to get, like the out-of-tree CSI, is to determine which versions customers are running, vSphere versions that our customers are running, so that we can better determine when to be able to roll out like the out-of-tree CSI, which requires 6.7 U3 and higher, and hardware 15.
Yeah. So we have a question here. So, and I think that might be Peter. So any guidance on vMotion for control plane nodes and worker nodes? So I know from a documentation perspective, let's go up here and we'll go back to our installing on vSphere, and we'll just pick this one. There is
so Richard's tested this. So storage vMotion we know isn't supported. Richard's got a script. It's kind of like a chaos thing where it just vMotions your machines all over the place all the time. Like that's what it does.
Okay.
Richard, do you wanna talk about?
For sure, yeah. So, kind of touching back briefly on the CI testing we discussed earlier, one of the key things you run as part of that is the OpenShift end-to-end test suite, which is a massive set of tests.
Yeah.
Over 1,200 tests get kicked off. So what we theorized was that vMotion, in and of itself, wasn't actually causing problems, but it was the underlying infrastructure that was causing problems when vMotion was invoked.
Okay.
So in order to proof that, what we did was we wrote this chaos script that what it does is it vMotions almost continuously the control plane nodes and the worker nodes while running the OpenShift tests, and we measured to see if there was a marked increase in the number of failures. There was not a significant uptick. Now this does assume, because I have two environments. I have my environment behind me, which is a Dell 2U it's an HP 2U server. It does not hold up as well under this test. Where it did hold up well was in VMC, where we have, I think it's a 25 gigabit backbone, right, Joe?
It's 100
gigabit backbone. So vMotioning takes a very small amount of time there versus on my 1 gigabit network. And so in my environment, it had problems. In VMC, it did not. And it's simply because if your environment is performance enough, it can handle the load. If it is not, then vMotioning control plane nodes may not be the right choice because you may see an API outage.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, so I just pulled up vCenter. Our CI cluster is vMotion 48,000 times.
I'm sorry, how many times? 48,000?
Yeah, so that goes back
to
the
world record.
Yeah, right?
Exactly. So that goes back to when we were having EDRS enabled. So now we've set that statically. I don't think it's growing as much as or as fast as it was, but
okay,
because it pulls hosts out of the cluster once you've reached a threshold too. So we were, increasing and decreasing hosts quite often. But
it's interesting. I wonder if that's one of those problems where or things where if you are experiencing a problem, if you have Enterprise Plus and DV switches turning on network IO control to limit the amount of throughput that vMotion can consume to actually give the VMs the ability to have their bandwidth, especially etcd. I can imagine, because vMotion, from what I recall, is there's no limit on the amount of throughput that it'll consume. So if it's sharing bandwidth with, for example, the network adapters being used by the control plane, for etcd communication, that would be bad.
I would also refer back to the VMware best practices around vMotion, because there are very, very specific recommendations to try to reduce the possibility of having that type of resource contention. But I would say it's not something that is implemented to the T very often.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll dig up the link for VMware's, or if you have it handy, you can just post it over to me. I'll see if I can dig up the link for their vMotion best practices, and we can share that in the blog post. So again, I know we've only got a couple of minutes left. I actually do have a hard stop at the top of the hour.
Yeah.
So please keep an eye out on Friday for the blog post. So in those blog posts, if you saw earlier, right, I put a timestamp in where we answer questions and stuff like that. Try and turn those into a reference. I know that having a 60-minute recording to find, the 30 seconds where we answer your question is sometimes, you don't want to listen to 60 minutes of me babbling. So I do try and do that, as well as we include links. All the links that we shared here, we'll have all of that stuff inside of there. So with just about 4 minutes left, 5 minutes left, please, if you have any other questions, anything that's top of mind, please let us know. So to circle around and answer that question about vMotion. So yes, vMotion absolutely supported. Nothing wrong with doing that. If you start to encounter issues, maybe check your environment, right? See what's going on there, but it is something that is supported by us. So all that means is that if you open a support case, they might end up sending you over to that link that I had up a minute ago, which is the one created by Joe and Richard on here's how to determine performance characteristics of your vSphere environments, to help troubleshoot those types of things. But yeah, storage vMotion definitely not supported. And I know, among other things, that causes issues with persistent volume claims as well. If you storage vMotion a node that has PVCs attached to it, it also brings all those PVCs with it, which then causes them, the provisioner to lose track of them. It just doesn't know where they are. So that's an important one.
Yeah.
And I don't think that changes with CSI either.
Not from what the storage team we were in a chat about a month ago, and it sounded like it didn't. Like the original plan for the out of tree CSI was going to support storage vMotion, and it sounds like it's being backtracked. Though if you look at the recent PRs, there was one if you were running in a vSAN environment, so maybe that changes how they can handle. But I'm not quite sure if you have vSAN, why are you storage vMotioning? But
well, yeah.
Unless it's to move off of or to vSAN, yeah.
Yeah, to vSAN, right? I guess that does make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, well, I don't have any more questions for y'all. I would just want to say thank you very much for coming on today. I know our originally scheduled subject for this week was licensing entitlements, but our guest had to delay out a week. Apparently there's some PM thing going on today. So we'll be covering that next week for anybody who is watching. So thank you very much, Joe and Richard. I know I asked you like super last minute, hey, do you mind joining, or is it possible for you to join? And you both immediately jumped on that grenade, and thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you for
I
having
really
us.
appreciate it.
It's been fun.
Yeah,
Awesome.
for sure.
So for anybody in the audience, if we either didn't adequately answer your question, if you didn't get to ask your question, if there's something that comes up to you after the fact, whether or not we're on the air here streaming, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Andrew.sullivan@redhat.com. Chris is short at redhat.com now.
Mm-hmm.
You can also reach out on Twitter, Practical Andrew or Chris Shorts on Twitter. We're more than happy to field any and all of those questions at any point in time. So thank you very much for watching today. Again, please keep an eye out on Friday for the follow-up blog post, and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah. See you soon, folks.
Bye.
Yeah.